Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about a set of books that in theory are a trilogy, but in theory could stretch on infinitely, or as long as he writes them. And that's the Pilcrow novels by Adam Mars Jones. So Adam Mars Jones is an author who I have sort of enjoyed. Well, I really enjoyed Box Hill by him a while ago. It was my favourite book of that year, pretty much, or one of them. And I actually at one point had a very lovely moment of actually sitting down with him for coffee, which was kind of wonderfully surreal, because he sort of holds forth on topics and sort of talks in paragraphs, which now makes a lot of sense given the size of these books. So essentially the core idea behind these is that this is a series of novels following one character, and they are semi-infinite as a series, as he describes them, meaning that essentially he will just keep writing them as much as he kind of wants to. It's more about kind of following the character than necessarily specific plot points, and in many ways that maps a lot with the actual books themselves. So the first one, and it's slightly annoying me, I know that somebody in the comments will also pick up on this, it does slightly annoy me that we've got two in the new design and one in the slightly older one, anyway, so the core idea is of Pilcrow that started it all off. We've got this character John Cromer, who is this character who for several reasons is sort of an outcast. He's a young boy, he realizes he's gay, but he also has various mobility issues. And so for most of, particularly this book, he is in a hospital and kind of looking at the world around him and trying to understand it. And as a result, it sort of is almost plotless, or not really heavy on plot, because he's mostly just observing the world around him. He's mostly just trying to, I suppose, understand how he works, and how his body works, and what it means to be a young boy, and particularly one who, for various reasons, can't interact with a lot of the world. And this also is part of the reason for the title. So Pilcrow, is sort of explained early into this book, is a piece of punctuation that he basically realizes is it exists and almost operates like this sort of 27th letter, which is also how he sees himself. He sees himself as this sort of redundant letter that doesn't fit within the alphabet, but sort of sits on the margins, is there, you don't always notice it, but it kind of does its own thing. And this is a kind of common theme throughout. So Cedilla, the second book, is another piece of punctuation, or sort of diacritic, and Carrot is the same. So it kind of picks up on this idea. And what I find quite fun and playful about this is the way that's the way it finds itself into the text. So, for example, early on, we start to see words creep up into this book, where essentially, that kind of whole thing where two letters next to each other kind of get merged. So the sort of older spelling of Aesop, as in Aesop's Fables, is the kind of A and the E as one letter. And often in this book, there'll be a very strong point made of integrating that into the text itself. Likewise, in Cedilla, we see a lot of these where it's sort of played around with even more, where the core idea of playing with some of those letters appears, and even to the extent where sometimes words have them where it wasn't necessarily needed. It's sort of in there as a stylistic choice, because we kind of get the idea that that's coming from the character themselves. And equally in Carrot as well, this kind of continues, where we almost keep building this sort of lexicography, or kind of vocabulary, I guess, of this young character who slowly is aging and going through parts of his life. And so I think that kind of stylistic choice is kind of part of the fun, and in many ways is emblematic of the much wider thing that this book is doing, which is it's deceptively playful and fun, because the book is largely concerned with the ways that he kind of constructs his worlds and kind of constructs his reality. He's often, particularly in Pilcrow, where he's his youngest, is often just completely missing the point of everything going on around him. The kind of established way of things happening does not tally with what he does. You know, he might sort of say, well, why does this thing happen? Why do I need to do this? And everyone around him's like, what are you talking about? Like, everyone just does this. Why are you questioning this thing? Or why are you saying these things? Like, this is not that deep. And it kind of continues more as he sort of ages. So in Sedilla, he is slightly older, and at one point is on a trip to India. And as a result, he sort of is encountering these new ideas, and he sort of is being part of this new world for him and kind of finding new things. But equally, although particularly through these first two, his sort of burgeoning sexuality is a really big part of the plot of him working out who he is. And this continues into Carrot, where he's a little older still, and some of these things are starting to kind of become a bit more concrete in his life. He's starting to understand himself a little bit better. He's a little less naive, although still very naive in many other ways. But something I also wanted to pick up on is these are books that sort of have chapters and also don't. But the way, I mean, they're also very dense text-wise. I'm not selling this, but they are actually really good fun, and I'll come on to that in a bit more. But yeah, you'll get like little chapter headings instead of sort of full-blown chapters in that sense, which are often quotes from the section you're about to read. These are often slightly balmy and off the wall. These will be a catchphrase from somebody, or, you know, a little snippet of something they've said that's a little bit absurd. And absurd in many ways is the kind of the goal with these books. They are just sort of deeply absurd and silly, whilst making some more intelligent, kind of more sensitive points as well. For example, often he will just find himself in these slightly ridiculous scenarios, and these sort of small chapters almost serve as these little punctuation pieces themselves in between everything that's happening. So, for example, we will hear about him going through something, and then we'll almost immediately cut to somebody else who's just sort of talking about their ideas on something, and they're sort of like, isn't it funny that this thing happens? And, you know, you'll have these little asides, which makes them, for me, feel both very, very British, and also they've kind of got this sort of campness to them that's really, really fun. I think this kind of absurdist camp kind of take on everything, where nothing is particularly serious. You know, some quite big serious things happen, but the characters around the circumstances are quite light-hearted about it often, or will say something absurd and funny around it. And so you've just kind of got this odd thing happening constantly throughout the book, where you're just, I feel like basically these are books that are sort of meant to partly sort of tickle the grey matter and make you, you know, get you thinking, but often in a really fun, playful way, where these are books to just sit and spend time with and absorb and just have, yeah, just let the kind of silliness wash over you. Because quite often there's a very powerful sleight of hand happening within these books, where something that feels like it's a silly tangent actually turn out to be quite interesting or informative or powerful in other ways. Sometimes they are just silly tangents, but regardless, you know, Adam Mars Jones is sort of there behind the scenes directing the puppets to do this, and often there are some incredibly funny but also very wise sentences, really meditating on things around breakdowns and desperation, and particularly in sort of some of the earlier books, around yearning and desire, and what it means to be a young person figuring out your identity and not having the words for it, or not having the kinds of interactions around you that really help you understand it. So yeah, for many reasons I really enjoyed these books, as long as they are. The 2,000 pages of this trilogy so far, I think, are worth it. My advice on it would be to just really take your time with it and let them wash over you, because I think there's a lot of really fun writing in there that's just really engaging, and a great way of just experiencing little pockets of joy and absurdity in the more mundane. Anyway, I've been Bob the Booker even, talking about these three books. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm also really keen to read more Adam Mars Jones, if anybody has any other recommendations. Take care, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.